Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Wanted to gather today to share some important news that can give us some optimism as we work to provide critical services for Montanans during these challenging times as we fight COVID-19 and also wildfire season. We've now wrapped up the end of the state fiscal year and have a greater understanding of how the pandemic has impacted revenues and expenditures. We headed into this pandemic in an historically strong position financially. We were careful stewards of taxpayer dollars, and now Montana really is in an enviable financial position compared to many other states that are currently weathering budget challenges. And as a result, we are now taking steps to ensure that Montana will be well equipped to continue financially managing this pandemic into the future. First off, over the weekend, we transferred $46.7 million into the Fire Suppression Fund, allowing us to fill it to the statutory maximum of $101.5 million. This puts the fire fund at its maximum cap for the first time in history. We're able to do this because of the prudent fiscal management and careful stewardship of taxpayer dollars by state agencies under the executive branch, as well as other savings. State agencies finished the fiscal year under budget, and by law, those reversions then are transferred to the fire fund. Because the fund has now reached its maximum cap, the remainder of the reversions, which is approximately $40 million, stayed in the general fund. At the start of the pandemic, I asked state agencies to tighten their belts, and I'm pleased that they did so. The fire fund filled to the brim is an important cushion to have during this time. We're ensuring that if 2020 does decide to surprise us again, this time with a fire season like the one that we had in 2017, where we spent about $65 million on the state side, we'll be able to cover those costs as well as leave plenty for the 2021 fire season. But we're also making sure that Montanans prepared for the wildfire seasons that come our way, not just this year, but for several years to come. The fire fund now contains enough money to cover nearly 5 average years of state fire suppression cost. If you look, the 10-year average state fire suppression cost is about $21 million a year. The budget stabilization reserve, or the rainy day fund, remains at its statutory maximum of $114.2 million. This is the second year in a row that that reserve has been funded to its statutory cap, and it's available to sustain the budget should revenue collections or expenditures vary from projections as we continue to navigate through the pandemic. With this rainy day fund and the fire fund filled to the maximum, and with healthy balances in the general fund, we have strong reserves at $620 million as we began the new fiscal year, leaving us well equipped to handle the uncertainty ahead. I'll also note that revenues from tax collections came in $21 million above what the legislature had estimated during the 2019 legislative session. Projections made not even fathoming that COVID-19 would wreak havoc on our national economy. While none of us could have anticipated a global pandemic as we wrapped up the 2019 legislative session, we did anticipate that the unexpected could come our way. We took the right steps to make sure our budget is in good shape and left money in the bank for unforeseen circumstances. But just don't take our word for it. It's corroborated by trusted independent third party. Fitch Ratings which is one of the three ratings houses that look at what sort of states both the budget outlook and the way we're managing money, recently affirmed Montana's conservative approach to fiscal management, affirmed our bond rating of AA+ and stable outlook. In their affirmation statement, they wrote, the state's consistently conservative approach to fiscal management has enabled it to maintain steady operating performance, address spending priorities for education, healthcare, and infrastructure, and build formal reserves. These strengths leave the state well positioned to manage through the current downturn and future economic cycles, providing support for the stable outlook. While we're certainly not immune in Montana to the nationwide economic challenges, and projections are just that, projections, we are resilient. We find no reason to have to make cuts now to essential services, especially as they're more essential than ever as we face this pandemic and the correlating economic challenges. We'll continue to manage our budget as we have this pandemic, based on science and facts, not politics. Focused on the decisions that will best serve Montanans both today and in the long run. We know that this new fiscal year will be challenging and that we will likely spend more than we take in. But starting in such a strong position with full reserves and a good ending fund balance, coupled with continued conservative fiscal management, will allow us to close out the year solidly in the black without touching our rainy day fund. If Congress ever takes action on the question of revenue relief to local and state governments, we'll finally know what tools we have available going into the next biennium. Unlike most states, Montana can manage with or without federal revenue relief. But getting some assistance from the federal government will go a long way toward normalizing the state revenue picture in the next couple of years looking forward. This is not the time to relax the fiscal discipline that has served us so well. At the same time that we're in the midst of tackling COVID-19, we're also in the midst of a wildfire season. Across the state, we're seeing an increase of fire activity as fuels have dried out and thunderstorms bring abundant lightning to the region. We have 9 new fires and 1 large uncontained fire with a Type 2 incident management team assigned to the Bear Creek Fire in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. August represents the peak of fire season for the West, and above normal significant fire potential is expected across Montana into September. We're witnessing the hottest and driest conditions so far this season, and the potential for isolated thunderstorms with abundant lightning remains. Montanans can rest assured that we're well equipped to handle 2 concurrent challenges with a fire fund that could cover nearly 5 average wildfire seasons and the reserves to sustain critical services and manage through the pandemic. And just like with COVID-19, we're also asking Montanans to take matters into their hands to help us keep Montana lives safe throughout the wildfire season. Just as with COVID-19, when we work together as Montanans, as one big community, we can reduce risk. As in the past, wildfire risk for the remainder of this season will be highly dependent upon both weather and human factors. Even during a normal fire year, hundreds of wildfires will likely burn hundreds of thousands of acres, costing Montana taxpayers millions of dollars. So far this year across the Northern Rockies geographic area, there have been 2,081 wildfires burning over 66,000 acres. To date, wildfire protection agencies and our local government partners have routinely excelled at initial and extended attack, keeping fires small and short duration. They work tirelessly to prepare for this fire season, and their hard work is paying off. The falling star fire in Yellowstone and Stillwater counties was human-caused, burned 2,271 acres on mostly private land. Few structures were damaged, but none were completely lost to the fire due to the rapid response of the interagency air and ground resources. The Lump Gulch fire in the Clancy area south of Helena was started by a power line, burned 1,079 acres. Fire burned on Forest Service, state, and private land. 2 outbuildings were lost during the initial attack, but no primary structures were lost. I want to thank all of those working hard to keep us all safe while we manage 2 concurrent challenges. This year is unlike any year before it, but seeing the continued heightened levels of interagency collaboration and communication gives me confidence that Montanans can feel safe knowing that we're ready to protect the public and our firefighters. Just as with COVID-19, prevention is also key here. It's imperative that Montanans take the necessary steps to make their homes and their communities fire adapted. 60% of wildfires in Montana are human caused. And this year, more than any other year, we're relying on Montanans to do their part to keep fires from starting. The falling star fire is a stark reminder of how human action can start a fire and how quickly conditions can change. So I want to remind everyone to please use caution when outdoors. Remember, it only takes one spark to start a wildfire. Montana has always been about caring for our neighbors, and through our actions, we can help save property and, more importantly, save lives. Wildfire protection agencies across our state are redoubling their efforts to educate Montanans on how they can recreate responsibly and harvest crops safely. Our firefighters are also deliberately engaging with Montanans to help make their homes and communities fire adapted and more resilient to wildfire. Simple and inexpensive mitigation actions will help keep your families and your homes safe while reducing the burden on firefighters this season and driving down the costs of fire suppression. Preventing a fire is the best way to protect the public and allow our available firefighting resources to focus on the natural igniters. Together, I know that we can protect Montana lives, communities, and natural resources throughout this fire season. And together, I know that we can protect Montanans and Montana lives from COVID-19. When you head out to enjoy our public lands, make sure to fully extinguish that campfire. When you stop to fill up on gas or groceries for the adventure on public lands, make sure to wear that mask in the gas station or grocery store. Listen to the advice of local public health. If you're asked to quarantine, avoid those large social gatherings or stay home when sick. Listen to our nurses when they share why masking up prevents transmission of the virus. And listen to your firefighters if you're asked to evacuate or take other safety measures. These folks are working around the clock to keep you safe, and we must take responsibility to keep them safe. Montanans in every corner of our state are counting on one another to act responsibly to protect each other. We're now navigating a new normal with wildfire season in our midst. We're all going to have to be extra mindful in the coming weeks, but it's that mindfulness that will reduce the risk all around us, help our schools reopen safely, and mitigate losses of life. I'll now open it up for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can press 5*. You'll be notified that your hand is raised. When we unmute your phone, you'll be notified that you've been called on to ask your question. If your question has already been answered, please, you can press 5-star and it unraises your hand. First phone call.
Hello, Eric Dietrich with the Montana Free. Eric Dietrich, the Montana Free Press here. How much has the state spent on firefighting so far this season?
How much has the state spent on firefighting this season? I don't have that exact number for you, Eric. We'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Next phone question.
Governor, this is Kevin Trevlin from Yellowstone Public Radio. Thanks for holding this call. Do you know how coronavirus-related measures like arranging personnel in pods instead of big camps or more quickly deploying planes and helicopters have impacted the cost of fighting wildfires so far this year?
So, Kevin, at the start of the briefing, we looked at the overall sort of how to have the pods. I don't think it has significantly increased the costs, and so far we've been, for the second week of August, relatively fortunate in that. But to the extent that the DNRC can show any additional costs, we'll try to get it to you.
Thank you.
Next phone question.
Hey, Governor, this is Holly. How are you doing?
I'm good, Holly.
Good. I've got two questions. The first is, the Legislative Fiscal Division put together a report that the Legislative Finance Committee talked about last week, saying that reserves look sufficient through the 2021 biennium, but that in 2023 things could be fairly challenging. And understanding you won't be in office then, so maybe this is better directed toward Lieutenant Governor Cooney. But wondering if there's things besides these sort of transfers that you think should be going on right now, or any planning to prepare for what's expected in the 2023 biennium.
Well, I think, as you note, and I could turn it over to Tom or the Lieutenant Governor. As you note that they said we'll be good through this biennium, it's looking years ahead of what the challenges might be. I think two things, one of which is I will be leaving the state budget in a better position than even we found it, because also we made sure to be prepared for the unexpected fiscally. We are in good shape, and legislature will need to do like what we've done each time, is said roll up your sleeves to make sure that you're worried about not just today but in the future. There also might be, as we look, and that's one of the things, there's still a lot of federal discussion about local and state revenue relief that might come out of CARES 4. And one of the things that, will be good for the next biennium, as they noted that it's a couple years down the line, and I could see that money being very important to both local governments and the state.
And then the second thing I wanted to ask, there's been a lot of work on HJ 35 over the interim, looking at local and state tax structure. I'm wondering, as that committee is putting out their recommendations, if there's anything in there that you see that you like, if there's anything in there you think is concerning, and just sort of wondering too if there's things you'd like people to be looking at, given how COVID has changed some of the revenue pots that the state has relied on in the past.
Holly, hi, this is Tom Livers. Let me first just maybe add a little bit onto the governor's answer to your first question, although it's I think it's essentially, he covered the key points. In terms of preparing for the coming biennium, we're continuing to manage conservatively, just as we did finishing up this fiscal year to get to the healthy reversion levels. As he said, this isn't the time to relax any of the fiscal discipline, so we're going to continue throughout this administration to manage conservatively through the first part of this fiscal year. We were slightly different than the Legislative Fiscal Division's projections that were discussed last week at the Legislative Finance Committee. We're a little more bullish on on revenues, and we also have a different look at expenditures. They're pretty much required to look at assuming we will spend up to appropriation levels, and we do not plan to do that, just as we didn't at the end of FY20 for the last quarter. Also, we know we're going to be offloading some legitimate expenses for the state to the Coronavirus Relief Fund, to the CARES Act. So those things will put us in a different fiscal position. And then in terms of heading into the next biennium, we'll leave the state in a decent fiscal position with full reserves. So they'll have all the statutory tools, all the statutorily available tools to manage heading into the coming biennium. And as the governor said, one of the biggest questions remains the question of if Congress will allow any of the federal relief funds to be used for state and local government revenue relief. Again, we don't have to have it for the immediate future. It would help normalize the budget heading into the coming biennium. So if Congress does act on and grant revenue relief, then I think the combination of conservative fiscal management, full reserves, legislature is actually going to have quite a few tools available to them to face what we're anticipating in the coming biennium. And then with respect to HJ 35, we're looking at what's coming out with those recommendations. We really haven't fully digested them and haven't taken a position on any of what we're starting to see so far.
Next phone question.
Hi, Governor Bullock. This is Maritza Giorgio with NBC Montana. Thanks for holding this. And I'm sorry, but I have a question unrelated to fire season. I'm wondering if you can comment any further about reports over the weekend of plans to remove dozens of USPS drop boxes across the state, and if you've had any further discussions or investigations about what's happening on the ground here.
I've not. I sent a letter on Friday expressing my concern. I'm certainly happy to hear that reportedly the Postal Service put a hold on taking any more boxes away, but they still need to put them back, and we still need answers about why they were taken to begin with. Even though the administration presumably backed off on this, there's still other irregularities reported with changes to protocols at the Postal Service, and Montanans deserve answers about if these changes have caused any delays in mail delivery, that someone in rural Montana waiting on their medicine, say insulin, even a day's delay is absolutely unacceptable. Next phone question.
Hi, this is Perrin Stein from the Bozeman Daily Chronicle. I was hoping you could give an update on how much of the $1.25 billion from the CARES Act has been distributed, how much has been allocated, and kind of what your plans are for the remaining funds.
Total of about $1 billion has been allocated, and continue to have the flexibility like what we had just last week as we looked at the large entertainment venues. Continue to make sure that we can address over the next 5 months of this calendar year, and continue to have flexibility. Like schools wouldn't necessarily be able to open without those additional dollars put out. In just the last couple of months, we got out to our schools and $7.5 million out to meat processors. We launched 2 new grant programs. So far, 6,000 small businesses had just since last week signed up to receive a second round of the business stabilization grants. So we're getting the money out to where it's needed most. And at the same time, if Congress does finally act on state and local revenue relief, we'll be able to take action on that. So the legislature, as the budget director did say, will have more flexibility going into the next session. And both the allocations and the money out, it's all unlike what we've seen at the federal level. It's all on the website. Next
Hi,
one.
Governor. It's Phil Drake from the Tribune.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, it's Phil from the Tribune. I just noticed that the state passed 200,000 tests over the weekend. Does that mean 1 in 5 Montanans has been tested, or have there been some repeat testing? I didn't know how that goes statewide.
So, Phil, when you look at 200,000 tests in total, it doesn't mean 1 in 5 Montanans have been tested. That those are the complete number of tests that have been processed since the start of COVID-19. So an individual that's tested early on, as an example, some may be tested as they're relieved or as they're relieved from isolation. So don't have the exact number of how many individual Montanans have been tested. It's 200,000 tests have been processed. And as you're asking about testing, Montana State University is up and running and fully operational. We gave them 1,200 tests to process on Friday. They'd completed them by Saturday. And then any of the positives that we confirmed them in our state lab, they'll be doing on average about 500 tests a day at this point. We continue to be pleased with Mako. Once they receive a test, we're getting that results back in 1 to 2 days. State lab continues to work at capacity, should improve turnaround times, take care of some of the challenges that we did have. Park County and Madison County both did community testing last week, and we're in the process of reaching out to the most impacted communities to see if they'd like to put in place community testing events.
Hi, Governor. Joey from ABC Fox Montana. Have you received any calls from Sharon Stone, and what do you say about her claims of nurses not being able to get tested, as well as people carrying guns around courthouses saying it's their right not to wear a mask?
Apparently, Ms. Stone did call our office last week, didn't make any indication of family members in hospitals, and I think she had called to offer to host or be part of a fundraiser to increase testing. Our Citizens Advocates Office spoke with her, I believe it was her this morning, to get additional information. But that's one of those that, look, we've been working with our healthcare providers to make sure that they have the resources that they need for testing. We're continuing to do the work to ensure that we can get rapid turnaround testing, and rapid being anywhere from 2 to 5 days everywhere across the state. And just as anyone might call with concerns or testing, make sure to have somebody from my office have that discussion with them.
Governor John Riley, Montana Television Network. I believe at the beginning of next week, the federal government is going to require 48 states to pay a copay on National Guard responding to COVID. How is the state going to pay for that copay?
So the 48 states, as far as the 25% as opposed, or let me step back. So our National Guard soldiers and airmen are doing an incredible job on behalf of all Montana when it comes to responding to COVID-19. They've stood up testing and assisted with that. They've helped out in nursing homes. They've done everything from help manage the supplies coming in. And as the Commander-in-Chief of the Montana National Guard, I'm so pleased with their efforts. Title 32 is when they are on a federal mission. And for the last number of months, and actually all the time that they're on federal missions, that's paid 100% by the federal government. A Title 32 order was, I think it expired last week. And to date, other than a small handful of states, they've said that states will end up paying 25% of the cost of the National Guard, and the federal government will be picking up 75%. Unprecedented when it comes to being on Title 32 orders. Raised concerns about that. And also, I'm also on what's called the Council of Governors. So both appointed under President Obama and Trump, there are 5 Democratic and 5 Republican governors that deal with the Department of Defense and the other federal agencies when it comes to state military preparedness. The longest serving member had raised some concerns 2 weeks about I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe it was last week, about the precedent that they're being set along the way by when you're on federal orders and asking the states to chip in some. We're continuing to have those conversations, knowing that I think 4 states or 5 states right now, they're at 100%. There's not real clarity as far as what makes those states at 100 and not the rest of them. So I've written a letter, continue to have those conversations to the extent that the state does need to pick up 25% of it, though. We'll use those CARES Act dollars because we need to continue to have the men and women of the National Guard providing assistance here.
Joey again, I just want to see what you're saying about Sharon Stone's claims that people are carrying around guns around courthouses, saying it's their right not to wear a mask.
Well, I think, look, there's been protesters in Helena and other places about masks. And even earlier about when Montanans all came together and dealt with the protest concerns about the stay-at-home order. And I mean, Montanans have the right to protest. If they do so, I would certainly encourage them to do so safely, maintaining social distancing, and wearing a mask. Thank you very much. And again, on both sides, please be safe when you're out in the woods and public lands. While our fire fund is well in place to handle even much more than 2020, the fires that are never receive a name, meaning that either are prevented from ever occurring or immediately put out, are the ones that we want to have the most reporting about. And also, as we continue along with the challenges of COVID-19, please continue to exercise that same and greater diligence to take the actions to prevent any further transmission and spread.